I'd like to introduce Bhairavi Soni, who is the founder and director with Solaris People Solutions Private Limited since 2008. She has overall experience of over 19 years spanning in pharma to ITS organizations. In her current role, she is involved in end-to-end consulting, providing complete leadership and talent development solutions to corporate clients across the industries. Bhairavi is also highly spiritual in nature and is a student and practitioner of Bhagavad Gita. Apart from her rest, her current most favorite role is mothering her 1-year-old daughter who keeps her plate full and heart fuller. So once again, Bhairavi, welcome to the Safe Space session. If I were to ask you to define yourself in 3 words, what would be those 3 words that you'd choose?
Interesting. So I would say I'm very impulsive, uh, um, idealistic, and very individualistic in nature.
What's the association behind these 3 words that you've chosen?
Yeah, so impulsive because I've always been like all hearts. I have taken decisions in the spur of the moment, and that's how I've been right from my childhood, be it professional or personal decisions. Everything has been like that. To the extent where sometimes I even get self-destructive in those decisions. So, but impulse is something that I have never been able to, and I would never want to part ways with. Idealistic because I have high expectations of myself. Whether I fulfill those or not is a different story altogether. But yeah, sometimes I tend to beat myself up, going after those expectations. And individualistic, the sense of identity and the sense of me in we has always been very, very important for me. And I think that's also one of my life giving forces. So if that identity or the individuality part is taken away, probably I will cease to perform or exist. So while that came last, I think that's the most important of the three.
Would you have chosen these 3 words for you, say, 15 years ago?
15 years ago, I would have chosen maybe two, not three. I would have still chosen individualistic and impulsive. Like I said, impulse is something which has been there since childhood. The idealistic part is something maybe I caught along the way, or maybe I caught the awareness of it more recently. Maybe after becoming a mother, where the expectations and the norms are more clearly set on the table, and they're like more mess me not kind of parameters now. So
Okay. So, what do you think has brought about the transformation from your childhood to where you are right now in that particular trait that you just spoke about?
uh, so it's purely the expectation that I have of myself, which I see more clearly now. But overall, I think that the transformation that has happened in me in past, since you said 15 years back, what I was versus what am I right now. I think one transformation that I clearly see now is a person who more clearly wants to live her own values and her own life for herself. And back in the days, it was always about abiding or fulfilling the other people's expectations, to the extent where sometimes I would not shy away from calling myself a bit of a suppressed personality. And in past 15 years or so, I think there's been this need to kind of break away and live with values, but live to cater to yourself first. So I think the recent transformations could be the outcome of this thought process that has been imbibed.
Who has influenced you the most in this journey?
I would say my father has influenced me, and obviously my mother. And they've actually had a very opposing and contradictory roles. So I think it was such a balanced game that they played. I don't know, knowingly or unknowingly, but it's just created the personality that I have right now. So yeah, so my father's always been somebody who's been very righteous, and the value idealistic maybe comes from there. So where he has had expectations of how his children should be in every norm, arena, etc. And then there was this fear and gap that created. And mom has always been the person who's been a cushion. So she's been more of a friend and less of a mother, and I think overall it created a very healthy balance, so as to say. And I must say that they managed to raise me without any baggages. So I feel very happy to say that I've actually been raised so well, and I had, if at all I have any baggages, I only collected them later, and they were never a part of my growing up journey.
Were they
So
actively involved in your parenting from childhood?
oh yes, completely. So I have two siblings. I'm the eldest of the three, and despite that, I feel the level of involvement and engagement, and I never ever felt that even after having like two more siblings, where they had their hands so full of things, and back in the days they didn't have so much of help that we can probably have or afford right now. So there was never a feeling that I didn't have enough of them ever at any point in time. In fact, I would only say the other way around, that I was always more pampered, more dear, more closer to them for whatever reason. So yes, involvement was never an issue.
So tell us about your childhood, Bhairavi, a favorite memory that you could recall.
Favorite memory. Okay. There are quite a few, but one thing that I really remember is so my dad was so obsessed with me when I was little. Is he used to actually take me to work. Okay, so every day, and his work involved a bit of field work. So he had a factory, and then he had to go around and meet few people, etc. And I was 2 years old that time, and he would take me along with him every single day, and he would go about doing his daily tasks and work, etc., while I would be patiently waiting in the car for him and entertained by, like, whatever is possible at that point in time. And the funny thing that happened is, one day he and my grandparents' house used to be exactly where his factory was. So it was like a known arena and locality kind of stuff. So sometimes he would drop me at my grandparents' place, and once he forgot to get me back from work. And he got back home at around 12 midnight, and then he realized that, oh, he had taken me along, but he forgot to get me back from there. And at 12, he kind of rushed to take me back at the grandparents' house. That was a very funny and fond memory that I still remember happening, and it often gets talked about as well. So yeah,
How old were you then?
I was 2 years old. So hence it's even bigger thing, because I have a daughter who's 15 months old right now, and I know that if I have to take her somewhere, it needs so much of planning that I just get exhausted thinking about the planning. But taking a 2-year-old every single day it was like quite a task that time. So
Was there any point in time during your upbringing or your childhood, did you feel, that you were in a safe, in an unsafe space?
Uh, Not really, Zian. So I come from a very orthodox and extremely conservative setup. So I think safety was somewhere the most underlined, expectation, though it was never really communicated to us in that way. But I remember that even right now, my dad is as much he gets an opportunity, he's very protective, and he also keeps telling me to follow the same norms for my daughter now. So
Right.
I don't think safety ever got to be an issue as such. Lot of norms and rules defined, even when it came to how they conduct or behavior with cousins should be, and without
Right.
communicating, the way he would look at us would kind of tell us that what's expected, and where to draw the boundaries. So the boundaries and the walls were very tall. I would say much taller than what they should be.
What is your understanding of a safe space?
Yeah. So my understanding of safe space is simply to not let the person go through anything which creates a baggage for them, and which leaves uh, an impression for life long journey of theirs, which is not desired. So just let the children, we talking about children over here, so let them be in that innocent and playful and harmonious phase that they are meant to be in, and giving them that kind of an environment is safe space in every possible way. Of course, we're talking about sexual over here, but it could also be, mental abuse, that people go through. So in whatever way. So just letting their innocence and the playful attitude and the harmony in their minds, just let that be intact. And I think that that's what I would define as the safe space.
Did you at any point in time in your growing up years feel unsafe? It could be probably in the neighborhood, while at school, during your teenage years.
Right. So yeah, there were incidences, and I don't know, fortunate, unfortunate, whatever. Nothing happened as such, but when somebody tries to make some initiation, that happened with absolute stranger, and
Right.
I have not spoken to anybody about it because nothing honestly happened. But then I
Mhm.
realized that something could happen,
Correct.
and yeah, and because I was always trained and made to be ready with the boundary aspect. Maybe that's why I kind of didn't get into any problem space. But yeah, at least I'm aware of what the opposite of safe space could be, and how real and close it could be to anybody, no matter how protected that person is.
Do you feel that you are in a safe space right now, Bhairavi, with your family, with your
Oh
husband,
yes,
with your daughter?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. I would like to believe so, and I would constantly strive to make sure that I achieve it, because now the responsibility is upon me, right? So yeah, but I would say yes to that. I think it's, as of now, it's the word which is spoken and used and abused, but we are yet to reach there. So in my understanding, equality is just a desire, a state of desire right now, and as much as we claim and flaunt it, we are quite lagging behind it. So yeah, but at least we've reached a point where we pretend that we're equals, and we've reached a point where we can fight for it if we see the gap. And I think even the pretense and fight is a step better than where we were. But yeah, it's still a state of desire.
What is your experience of equality in your everyday life?
Okay, so I would just like to start, with my childhood journey to answer this question, Zian. So one of the things, obviously, I didn't experience, but I was told that the day I was born, and my father held me for the first time, he actually wept. Okay, and he wept because I was a girl child. And this is not to say anything negative, because I've already said that I've been raised really, really very well, and it's whatever I am. I give the credit to it to only two people, which is my dad and mom. But that thing happened because that was the programming, that was set uh, upon him, right? And obviously, and from there, so I belong to the kind of background where there was a lot of disparity, right? Disparity to the extent that the girls were not supposed to be educated because they were supposed to be married off by a certain age. Working, so when I took up my first job, it was like a taboo, for a girl to go out and work in my community. I'm not saying that I'm so old that those things. And I think my dad, and they don't come from a very liberal or educated background. They fought all these barriers, so it was, I think, more challenging for them, and maybe mildly challenging for me, because I actually experienced that, oh, this is something not very natural or normal, as but most of the fighting the society part was done by them, right? So that's
Right.
how the equality journey started. And I think, to the current point where I believe that I've become a rebel, and I've started demanding and expecting my share of pie, not that I always get it, but when I don't, I think at least I try to equip myself better to to kind of fight more, to demand better, and to raise the voice, so I think having a voice and being able to use it, and I think we've come a long way. I have come a long way, right? Are we still exactly where we need to be? No, because the recent thing in my life, being a mother, I realized that there is still a lot of disparity in the way the society expects things out of you, and that's where I say, as much as we'd want to pretend and demand, there is disparity. Accept it, but the fight continues, and I think I continue that fight with a lot of comfort and happiness, looking at my journey from where I've come to where right now. So at least I've made that much shift. So yeah, that's where I am right now.
Was there at any point in time you have experienced inequality? And if it was, can you share that experience?
So it's, I would not really be able to recall anything as such in the professional space, as such. thankfully I've been very fortunate, so I've always worked well and I've got what I've deserved, so there's never been an issue where that space is ever uh, uh, curbed equality. uh, but in the personal space, I do see that happening, so sometimes, like you said, I could be experiencing that as a bystander. Sometimes I relate to certain things, and yeah, so like I said, the role of parenting, for example, I don't know. I still don't know if there ever could be equality in that, right? So, so a lot of expectations, postpartum depression or guilt, etc. These are real things, and I think one of the reason that happens somewhere is because of lack of equality in that space. So, yeah,
True.
so that's where we are.
Do you think you have lived a privileged life?
Yes.
Why do you say so?
I would say so. I mean, some would like to call it as luck. Some would like to call it as hard work. In my case, I can't relate to both these terms as much. So I think, yes, there is a certain privilege where whatever I've done, I think my efforts generally land up in the right place, and I feel that I'm living a life much better than what I probably deserve, just purely effort wise. So hence I would say, yes, there is a factor of privilege attached to it.
What is your understanding of entitlement?
Good question. um, I don't know if I can express this. I've been really thinking and internalizing so much about this word of late, Zian, and I think entitlement is the sense where somebody just wrongly believes that you know they just deserve it all and they can get away with it all. Yeah, so and I think the way I've been thinking too much about it is because every time I see something remotely associated with entitlement, I just go back to my husband and tell him, you know what, we have a responsibility to raise this girl that we are raising, and not ever let the sense of entitlement creep into her head. So, yeah, so it's about having that wrong notion that I just deserve it all and I can get away with anything. That's what I understand as of
Great.
entitlement.
Do you think this culture of entitlement has caused any problems around us in the society?
Yes, it has caused a lot of problems. I think most of the problems somewhere stem from the sense of entitlement, right? Uh, so people who abuse their power, and who do wrong things, also are somewhere believers of entitlement. And I think these young children these days who are not able to handle pressure are also the victims of entitlement, because everything is kind of served to them so ready, and they don't know how to go through the various real processes of life, like failures and struggle, and handling negative emotions, etc. So the entitlement that they started off with somewhere is kind of making them fall also as hard and as steep. uh, so yeah, so it's actually seen in both the sides. So I honestly, Zian, I had kind of looked at the episode of Satyamev Jayate, and it was very disturbing. And after that, when we initiated this conversation, and when you shared the kind of research and work that you have done, I went through that also. And somewhere the numbers say that it's more than 40 to 50%, right? Which is one in two. Of course, this is a read number, not a guess number. I would never have guessed this. But now that I've read it, I think it's just something that I don't know, even right now I'm not able to come on terms to it. uh, and it's just not scary, but it's shameful that we are a part of the same society, so they're not outside, they're like us, right? So it's obviously it can only take place in the surrounding where somebody is having access to your child, right? So it has to be the immediate environment. It could be friends, relatives, or when they get exposed to the outside world, which is school, and the bus driver, whoever are the people around the child, basically. Rarely can be strangers. I think there is it's something that can never be expected or anticipated, because it's always in the most I mean, the fact that it's taking place to this extent is because taking place without expectation, right? I mean, if somebody is being exposed to the new environment, new set of people, uh, cultural difference, maybe somebody would be careful. But when the child is being exposed to the immediate family, the relatives, the parents of friends, whatever, I think it's something that it's so difficult to guess. Or then maybe the only thing to say or expect is everywhere. Every space is unsafe unless we really work to make it safe, right? So
So who typically sexually abuses children, Bhairavi? Who do you think does that?
one is, of course, they are psychos, but they are in such huge numbers, and I think these people are just anybody around us, maybe looking like us, talking like us, and maybe even giving such interviews, for all you know, right? They're the preachers in the society, maybe, and they are masking to do all sorts of good things, and they have this side to them where, because they feel that the child is not understanding what's happening, the child is not going to be able to express or communicate to anybody, uh, and for them it's like a toy, right? I mean, so yeah, and then they're using the sense of entitlement on them.
Do you know about the laws in our country for child sexual abuse?
No, I have no idea about the laws.
The POXO Act. Are you aware about any of the findings of that particular act?
No, Zen, I'm not. In fact, so I obviously, coming from the space of corporate learning and development, obviously a lot of abuse happens in that space also. So I'm aware of the
Right.
act, which is POSH, Prevention of Sexual
Gosh,
Harassment. That's more workplace related. Yeah,
related, yes.
but this one, no. In fact, I didn't know something of this sort existed before I read the questionnaire, and it was a happy relief that something is there. And then it's about educating people, because if somebody like me who's in the space of education does not know it, probably a lot of people don't know it. So
Right.
I'm ignorant about it right now. I don't know about the act or any of the the terms of the act.
Am I guessing right that you are also not aware about the reporting mechanisms under this act? So, in case if there is a child,
No,
there's a
I'm
case of
not.
a child sexual abuse, as a bystander, how would you report it?
I would only think of normal police complaint, etc. Because yeah, I since I don't know the act, I really would not know what is the way and procedure of reporting the act as per that law. So yeah.
Do you think, in your opinion, stringent laws and harsher punishments are the solutions to stop child sexual abuse?
I think yes, but more than that, I think what's really important is to talk about it. Uh, we associate, the taboo and trauma and all these terms to the act of this sort, and and then at the end, as the end result, people just go hush hush because it's considered to be something very bad. Yes, it is very bad, but it is bad on the part of the person who did it. It's not, the child has not done anything bad. The family of the child. So just like how we treat rape, it's like, oh my god, nobody should know. And even this thing, I think, is treated the same way. And so the person actually happily gets away with it, and so sense of entitlement is getting fulfilled by us. So I think, yes, stringent laws would help, but if that person is right amongst us and is a part of the society, what are we doing to kind of just root him off and just show him the place and mirror in terms of what has been done? I think that's it's the time that we did that more effectively. Thing that would help more is, as a society, we being very vocal about it. So not trying to roll these incidences under the carpet because there is a taboo attached to it, but exposing, being vocal about that person and uprooting that person who's wronged, from the society. It's all about the social structure, right? So instead of saying, oh, I'm going to be a part of the society and this should not go out, it's about this should go out and that person should not be the part of the society. So I think if we started doing that, then probably the sense of entitlement will be wept off, and maybe we'll be able to prevent it more. Definitely law is one of the things, but then everything can't be about, because that's still more reactive, right? So and then how many people would go that way, and then since I don't know the law, I don't know how much time it takes and what exactly is the outcome. But I think alongside the law, even this being vocal and coming out with it could be one solution for sure. I don't know, but I would just look out if somebody, tries to get overtly physical with the child in any way. When they're not really in that emotional or connected space, uh, and maybe gifting and trying to seek some alone time in whatever format. So maybe I would look out for these as signals.
Would you think that touching the breast of a child while she is wearing clothes would be considered as child sexual abuse?
Of course, yes.
What about showing nude pictures across to a child?
Yeah, 100%.
Showing your own private parts to a child, which again we term as exhibitionism.
Right, 100%.
We have access to a lot of information, sometimes jokes that are pretty lewd in nature or very sexist in nature. Sharing that across with a child, do you think that would be also considered as child sexual abuse?
Yes, it would be. I think yes, if they are managed well, the post cursor and everything. I think yes, they can recover. It also again depends on what is the extent of damage done, because the behaviors that you said, not everything is at the same level and equally traumatizing. But yeah, if no matter how traumatizing it could be, we can definitely, as a society, as parents, try to kind of get them out of it. And if maybe there's a lot of hope if done well. There are professionals, there are parents, there are people who are again a part of the society, but they have deeper emotional connect and deeper ability to get things. I think yeah, so if used, all these help is used, maybe there's hope. What should she do? Of course, she should report it to her parents. And since she has given that safe space to the brother to kind of express, in whatever way, knowingly, unknowingly, what has been happening, I think she's the first point of contact of the entire safe space concept. And I think she should really be the person to talk to the brother the most, to help him out of it, to mentor him, to guide him, and to be that emotional cushion which would be required for her to be at that point in time.
Right. And what do you think? Which parent should the elder sister approach?
Again, when I think this question is very counter equality, right? It could be anybody who's there, the first person who comes in contact with her, who the first person who's in the nearest room in the house, whatever. I think it doesn't matter, mother or father.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think collectively, as parents, will they confront the uncle, the chachu who was sexually abusing Gattu?
I don't know if they will, but if you ask me, they if they should, yes, they should confront, and the confrontation has to be really loud and I mean stern. It's like something so big, it can't be kind of let go of, sort of a thing.
Will they interrogate Gattu more to get more information from him in terms of what exactly
Yes,
happened?
yes, I'm sure that will happen. Yeah, and that should happen too. Since this is the provision made, I'm sure it has some value. And for a certain sect of people, the society that I come from, I think no, there is no need to go anonymous. um, because this whole concept of not being known for this, or the taboo that we attach, I think we are shifting the blame from the criminal to the victim, whereas you have not done anything wrong. Why should you go anonymous? The other person should feel the need to go anonymous and be hidden and be disappearing, all of that. So if it was me, I would not. But yeah, maybe for certain sect of people where the societal structure is such, and we are in a country where there are those societies which exist, right? So maybe that provision would help them. But personally, for me, I would not use it. So again, I really, I mean, it really stuck to me that there is this act, which is there, and I'm not aware, and I'm sure many people are not aware. If I would, and since I'm in the space of education, if I would get an opportunity, where I would have crowd, and if I could educate them, it's something that I would definitely want to take up as my personal action plan. So I'm going to go back and read and do more homework around it, and probably create a short module. Uh, all new parents like myself, because I'm also part of a few communities and the help groups, etc. So even if I get this to like 1,000 2,000 mothers, I think it's my bit. One thing for parenting thing is, we always strive to make our children ready for the society. I think as parents we give a lot of importance to what languages the child is going to speak, and how fast the learning curve is going to be, and how soon they'll beat the developmental milestones, etc. So it's all about creating a generation which is going to be accepted by the society. I think it's time that we shift the thought process to raising children who feel safer in the society, and reject people who don't belong to that society. So I think we should now just start thinking about that. I am a Rakshan.
So thank you so much once again for being part of this, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you so much. You too.